Hey duders, it's Dave. It is, I think it's the 10th September 2022. Anyways, I had some people ask how my WSL setup was on Windows. So I figured I'd just run through the basics of how I use Windows. I'm somebody that's coming at it coming from normally using a Linux environment or even before that, like a Mac environment. So for me, like moving to Windows was not the most exciting thing in the world. Like I thought it would be kind of terrible, but it's actually really good. I wouldn't say that I prefer using it over Linux, but I would probably say that I might prefer using it over a Mac at this point. Um, Along with some window management stuff, it can get pretty nice. So the real basics are kind of like, what's the state of it? How do you install, Linux at this point? Um, if you just put in like WSL into Google, you're going to go through like Microsoft's normal stuff. I would not do that. I would instead use this repository, which is called WSL Distrod. And basically what it is like a starter wrapper that will allow you to set it up and will allow you to pick the distro of your choice. So normally when you run through the install process, it's going to lead you towards an Ubuntu setup. That might be perfectly fine for you if that's what you're comfortable with. I really like using the R, which is the Arch user repository or whatever it is. And so I'm really comfortable and I like those package managers a lot more. And I also I don't need the rest of Ubuntu. I just want like the development side of Arch. That made it extremely easy. Like I came from an Arch environment where I already had tons and tons of dot files, and amazingly, almost everything just worked out of the box when I set stuff up. So if we come in here and just look at, I don't know, like a Neo, do I have a Neo fetch in here or something? I don't have a Neo fetch. I'm essentially just running Arch when I'm running in my terminal here. And so I installed it using this environment thing, which let me install that Arch side. And then I've got, like if I want to upgrade, NeoVim or something like that, I can just use Yay, and run through stuff. And you'll see like everything just kind of works in a typical Arch system, which is really, really nice. Hopefully I'm doing a thing for NeoVim. I upgraded last week, so it shouldn't be too bad. So other things, I'm not super excited about, just regular old floating windows. It's not very developer friendly to me. Like I was always somebody that was using like i3 or tiling window managers. So to do that, I use this tool called Comaribe, which essentially is like i3 but for Windows, and it's actually really nice. Now, so I'm going to start it up here so that you can see it. I just have this mapped to a a command here, just an alias, and now I've got i3 level tiling going on. It's really nice. So here, if I make another, let's say I make a private window, you can see it's going to do the normal tiling. It goes between my various monitors. You can drag and drop stuff, which is really nice. You can also minimize, and look how nice that animation is. Like it's got a couple hitches every once in a while, but like this stuff's really smooth, especially from i3, because it didn't have like, I wasn't on Wayland. I was just using like regular old i3. So it had some animation glitch stuff, and I'm really, really impressed with the way this is set up. So the way that Comaribe installs is through has like an auto hotkey config. So normally in Linux world, you'd set up like some .config file, especially with i3, that's what you'd do. And it'd just be a big file that would hold all your hotkeys, and then set up things like that. So for mine, I essentially have this auto hotkey command, and let me turn my face off for a second. You'll see, that auto hotkey is running in here. And if I wanted to, I could just hit edit the script, and it's going to give me the same file that my alias sort of loaded up here. And so you can look through, and it's essentially just you assign your hotkeys So for example, like what do I want? I want Q, Shift Command Q for closing the window. I want, Shift and what do I have? T here for running the Windows terminal. I can launch Firefox. So all the normal stuff that I normally used to do in Linux world still work perfectly fine here. It's actually, it's really nice. Like after I got this thing set up, I was like, this exactly gives me the most of what I liked out of running a Linux environment. I can even say like whether or not things should float or not. So I've got a couple tools in here, like for example, if I were to run 1Password or Zoom or the calculator or something, like it'll automatically go in a float mode. I also will run, as a good example of like something that I needed to replicate from my Linux environment was I use a terminal program to handle all my bookmarks, right? So I use this thing called Buku, which lets me come in here and say, okay, I want to go find that old blog, and I can jump and see faster Vim searching for Rails projects. Must be an old one because that one doesn't exist anymore. But essentially, I just have it hotkey to an alias B, and then it runs in here. And let's see, we got some older ones. Who's Brian Levin? What did he build? He's also a 404. Man, this shows you how long I've been using this. I think I've been using it almost, I don't know, a few years at this point. So let's see if we can get something a little. I'm just so curious, like, why do these things not exist anymore? Join Flexbox cheat sheet. Oh, cool. This one still exists. Anyways, so it lets me like set up a floating container for that stuff. Size, the program to the bit that I want it to. And so that's really good. I also, what else am I doing in my Linux environment that's interesting? The first big thing, if you haven't messed around with Linux environments or understand how they work, or these WSL environments, you can like load Windows files from your terminal, even though that terminal is running in a Linux environment. So I can just key up and call Notepad anytime that you're using these .exe files, as long as they're sitting within the Windows path, then you can call any of those files natively through it, which makes it really cool if you need to do like interoperability between these things. So, as an example, I could jump to, where would I jump to? I could jump to, where would I jump in my folder, like a videos directory? So if we look in here, we're actually in a mount. If we go to NNN, we'll see I am in mount, C, users, David Snyder videos. And then these are the videos that have kind of dropped in there. So the Windows environment gets mounted to the within the Linux environment to a mount, and this happens automatically, and it gets put to C, which means that I can just come in here and kind of just jam through, and you can see that Komorabe file in there. This is just like my Windows, setup for that user. And so I can really access these files. I can use my normal NNN stuff, or like my any of my Linux level things that I need to do here. Like if I want to update this ini file for some reason, I could come through and make that sort of change, right? So it's really cool. I can edit all those files. I can get to them really quickly, just using like normal like terminal Linuxy sort of things. The other type of thing that's really nice is I'm going to bring over a Windows thing, and that opened in my other monitor. But I can also just come in here and I can access everything that is, oh God, what happened to my Windows Explorer? Of course, this happens during a demo. What happened there, buddy? Let's see if that works again. All right, now it's back. So you're still in Windows. You're still going to get like little hitches. You still got to deal with the registry file. But for example, I'm in here looking at my Linux environment. So it just automatically gets set up itself as a mapped drive within Windows. So the same thing, we were showing like how to access the Windows side when we're in terminal and it's from a mount. The same thing happens over here where I can jump through and get to any of my normal, directories that exist within that Windows environment, within the Linux environment from Windows. And that just makes it extremely portable. So here's a good example of showing something that shows how interoperable this stuff can be. So I've got something, that I've been using forever, which is you guys have always seen that I use those little short URLs. And two ways that I do those is I either use a screenshot program and I drop files into a drop directory, or I, take files and I can upload them directly through NNN. So if we do like just an NNN here within my home directory, I've got, my normal stuff that's in here. And then I have a Dave Cloud in and out, which are like, those are my drop, directories. And so I've got a test file that's in here, which in NNN, I can, invoke it and say like, okay, I'm using the plugins. If you see there in the bottom left, you'll see it has a bunch of keys that I can press. These are just plugins that I've written. This U1 goes to a script, which all that it does is copy the file that I'm looking at, puts it in Dave Cloud in. And so when I'm going to do that, it should upload it. It's going to drop it in that file. It's then going to signal out and say, okay, that file needed to get moved up. And hopefully, did it give us a, it did. It didn't trigger the update. I think it's because it's too early in the morning and it's Saturday. So if we come in here and look at this, we'll see it did in fact upload that file. And it did, even though it didn't pop up here, we can see that it did actually send a notification to Windows. And so the way that that stuff works, crazily enough, if I come in and look at my, I keep a little wiki of this stuff, which is just like, hey, here's everything that I need to know about Windows or all this type of thing. You can set up your notifications. There's a small little wrapper that this guy's written, which allows you to essentially have a exe that lives within your Windows environment that Linux can call. So where I used to use something like iNotify within the Linux environment, I can now just use this WSL notify. And what it will do is it'll actually talk to the notification system that exists within Windows. So that's really handy for stuff like this, where it's like I'm doing, let's say, watch files or something like that, and I just want to pop up a, a notification when things are happening. So that's really nice from that perspective. I'll make sure to paste these links and put them someplace in the video description. The other things that you're going to need to do that I ran into is I needed to deal with Clipboard. So, I wanted the ability to come in here and let's, jump to EUI or something. And I wanted to be able to like, open up some random file. So let's pick a tooltip, index.css. And I wanted to be able to yank that, import tooltip, and then I wanted to be able to paste it, right? And that's not it's not going to work immediately. You've got to do a little bit of work to get something like that going. It's not going to work for NeoVim. It probably also will not work in some cases with just the normal clip stuff. So there's some documentation here, which is, hey, if you're dealing with WSL, if you're using NeoVim or something like that, like how do you go back and forth? Again, somebody's just made a very nice exe that give some interoperability between the two. And then that's a way that you can work like from one to the other, and it's perfectly fine. Other thing that's happening. So one bit is I used to use like Alacrity or something when I was in a Linux environment. And so I came over and I was like, well, shoot, I'm just going to use Linux. I'm going to use Alacrity over here. I really recommend just using Windows Terminal, which is what I'm using here at the moment. What's really nice about it is it does let you like get to those various different things if you want. So for example, I can get to a regular old Windows PowerShell if I want, or I can jump to my default, which is going to load up that Arch system that I've loaded. And you can give it some nice decorators, and you can even handle like some really nice theming stuff. The theming can be changed. The color schemes can be changed for each one of these. So for example, if you wanted your system here to be set up and you want the appearance to be different, you could actually change it. Now I can even load all my fonts that I was using perfectly fine. The only difference that you're going to see in that Linux environment versus the Windows one is, hey, Windows at the end of the day is doing the rendering and stuff of the font. So you're going to need to probably install the fonts in some cases in both places. That's really, to be honest, like the biggest thing that I ran into that I just kind of didn't like, but hey, it works perfectly fine. I'm able to get my nerd fonts that I get in these various different places and kind of put them back in there. And I still have full control over everything. Remember, I like to do my own theming. So like I really put this stuff through the paces. I'm still using that Mars trilogy of themes, the things that I was using, and really everything just works out of the gate. So like I'm using my normal Vim setup. Nothing's really changed here. One thing that we'll look at and see when we're looking at something like my fish setup, you do have the ability to like look and check and see like, am I running in a WSL environment or am I running in a in a regular one? So as a good example, I just showed you like, hey, these are the things that I needed to deal with that were different. So if I'm running in that WSL environment, I changed my notify send alias, and I actually point to that exe file. So that's just the Windows specific one. I start using that Comaribe thing, and I set my browser to be pointing to the Windows install of the browser. So again, I'm just calling against that mount. I'm going to program files. I can go to Mozilla. And what that allows me to do is that when I'm looking at something like, how did I do that? I can I can command click on these links, and it will open within Windows within that Firefox side of stuff. So everything's honestly pretty easy. These notes, these 4 notes, the notify bit, the clipboard bit, the browser bit, that's really honestly all that I had to set up to get things running. There's other things that you might want to look into are Power Toys. Power Toys is Windows. It's a Windows sort of setup file where you can set up some zones. You can deal with like an image resizer. It gives you like some more utilities that like developers might need. Like, hey, do you want a color picker? The biggest one that I probably use from this is sometimes use this image resizer thing if I need to. It does give you some nice things for within Windows Explorer to be, dealing with renaming files. But for the most part, I'm not doing too much to Windows. The other thing is I'm using, I believe it's called Flow Launcher. Let's check my GitHub. And check my repositories here, my stars. I think it's Flow Launcher. So Flow Launcher is what I'm using here for this, which is like, okay, I need to get to, Snagit, or I need to get to Steam, right? So just an application launcher. I honestly, there's like just like Mac, there's like 5 of these in Windows. This one's the best by far. Like it's the easiest to work with. I think it's the prettiest of them. If I remember it right, it's mostly it's C sharp, but you can write the plugins in anything you want. So I did one, I think, within TypeScript, and it'll give you your Alfred-like environment that you might need for something like that. Everything else, like to be honest, there's nothing that you need to do within the Linux side. So like virtual environments, you don't need to do any of that because it is just running perfectly here, which means like I'm just running Node and it's just installed here within the Linux environment. Windows has no idea that it's there. I never really need, I don't do any development in the Windows side of thing. It's always just working directly within this Linux environment. So like, you know, when I'm coming through and messing around with maybe some, you know, Storybook or React work, I'm just doing that, you know, through this environment here, and I'm not really touching anything else. So I don't know. Like, do I want to work in Windows every day? I've not. I'd prefer to be in Linux, you know, and it's mostly just, I don't like being in the Windows ecosystem as much. Like I don't need all the GUI tools and things like that. But if I have to be in a Windows environment, I really, at this point, I'm not worried about it at all. Like I can operate the same way that I did in Linux. I just have to worry about some, you know, stupidity sometimes. Like for example, if I jump in here and go to like my root directory over here, like I've got to do things like run as an administrator. Occasionally I have to go and deal with some stupidity around registry files or something like that. But everything else just works. All my dot files still work. Everything installs fine because as far as everything's concerned, it's still Linux. There's nothing wrong. I could even come in here, like here's, you know, I can run htop and I can see, okay, like there's those cloud scripts that I was running that I have running in there. You can see I have some Node stuff running for Vim. So you can see COC running, you can see Copilot running, you can see I have a Storybook instance running. My config file is running, and I've got that you know, wiki thing that's loaded up. So it's, dude, it's minimal. It's nice. I can still come in, kill things. It still operates like Linux. I'm kind of all for it. If you do have any questions, give me a yell. But like, if you're thinking about it, as long as you're okay with Windows, right? And again, the real benefit is like you can load Steam, right? You can just load up Steam and you can run stuff. So if those are your gains, you're going to have them there. There's obviously a lot of programs that are made for Windows. So it's nice from that perspective. I think the other big thing, probably why I would recommend it for developers, is just because like I'm running this off a giant desktop that has like so much power. Like you can't imagine how snappy it is to actually do development on this machine, just because I've got the hardware there and I'm not, you know, running off some dorky laptop. So anyways, that's it. Hope it helps you all. Probably jabbed too long, but I hope you all are doing well. See ya.